Hi everyone, this is Alan Rosinski of Metro Manhattan Office Space. Good afternoon. Today I'd like to discuss the Ukraine conflict and its eventual impact on the real estate market. More than 1.5 million refugees fled the country only in the first 10 days of the war. Who would ever thought we would see a major grand war in Europe during our lifetime? The stability of Europe and the prosperity that accompanied it are under threat. Even though the war is in a distant country, and NATO says that it will not get directly involved, the conflict will affect the United States in unexpected ways. First and foremost, it will keep inflation high. By the end of last year, rising prices were already a concern. According to the Labor Department, consumer prices increased by 7% in December. This is the largest increase in the Consumer Price Index since 1982. In some categories, such as car rentals, prices jumped even higher, up to 36%. At the time, however, the main reason for inflation was the pandemic. Ironically, now COVID seems to have faded into the background. New York City relaxed many of the pandemic rules, and more companies are announcing that they are returning their staffs to their offices. But the easing of the pandemic may not be enough to balance the impact of Russia's invasion on prices around the globe. It's not only oil that rose due to massive sanctions against Russia, but there was also a set of new supply chain disruptions, on top of those caused by the pandemic. Ukraine is a large exporter of grain, making up 17% of the global supply. Russia supplies 7% of the world's aluminum, which is used in soda cans, industrial manufacturing, and construction. It also supplies nearly 13% of global titanium, which companies like Boeing use to build certain aircraft parts. As a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Western companies have started to take political risk into account as a major operating concern. Many global companies, including real estate firms, have left Russia or temporarily halted their operations in Ukraine. In the days leading up to the war, when the U.S. was sounding the alarm, the House passed a bill to strengthen domestic computer chip production. It is an industry that relies significantly on Taiwan and China. In addition, Ukraine meets about half of the global demand for neon gas, and neon happens to be important for semiconductor chip manufacturing. Now, other sectors may also reconsider the overseas production of goods, bringing at least some of it back to the U.S. to stabilize various supply chains. However, minimizing dependence on overseas labor and materials will inevitably increase prices of goods and services, which will contribute to higher inflation. What does all this mean for commercial real estate, or residential for that matter? High inflation is to the benefit of borrowers and to the detriment of lenders. This has huge implications for the real estate industry. For those who are pessimistic about the U.S. economy and believe that 1970s stagflation is on the way, there's a glimmer of good news. It may be a good time to take out a mortgage and purchase a home or investment property. Inflation will make it much easier to repay the debt over time. It will also mean that the value of your property will grow faster. It's a great time to borrow as long as the interest rates remain significantly below the annual inflation rate. Eventually, banks will increase their mortgage rates as a response. While businesses bring their essential production back to the United States, we'll see more construction, more jobs, and maybe even more office buildings, assuming the pandemic eases. Commercial tenants can benefit from high inflation as well. Commercial leases are much longer than residential. They can exceed 10 years and typically include fixed annual increases of between 2% and 3%. When inflation exceeds that, tenants' rental costs decrease over the long term. Even though the rent goes up each year, it becomes easier to pay as inflation allows tenants to grow their revenue. To counter the risk of inflation, landlords will have an incentive to get rid of fixed percentage increases in favor of escalations based on the Consumer Price Index. So for the moment, any tenant that has fixed percentage escalations will benefit from those lease terms. Tenants who are about to sign new leases or lease renewals that include fixed percentage increases will benefit as well. Since the commercial real estate market in New York City is still weak, particularly the office and the retail sector, tenants can still likely negotiate fixed percentage increases in weaker markets like New York City and benefit. Should inflation over time reduce the profitability of commercial properties, landlords may be forced to reduce services or cut back on capital improvements to their buildings. They already have to deal with increased vacancy rates due to the pandemic and rents that are significantly lower than they were in March of 2020. In addition to cutting back on capital improvements, maintenance, and amenities, the more financially strapped landlords may be forced to cut back on tenant improvement allowances that they offer to new tenants. However, this allowance is a key inducement for drawing in new tenants, so it's not likely to go away completely. As for Russian oligarchs, the list of their U.S. assets mainly consists of private residential properties. A notable exception is Vlad Doronin. He owns a residential development firm and hotels, but Doronin, a dual American and British citizen, denounced Moscow's invasion. In Moscow, he owns a luxury home designed by Zaha Hadid. Mr. Doronin claims that he has never been a Russian national since he left the Soviet Union before its dissolution, and he didn't apply for a Russian passport. So while sanctions did cause some anxiety at luxury home markets in Miami and New York City, due to high net worth Russians playing an important role, commercial real estate will be affected in a more indirect manner, namely an inflationary shock. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'd be curious regarding what you think about the Ukraine conflict and its potential impact on the U.S. economy, as well as the commercial real estate market. Please feel free to share your comments below. If you found this content interesting or helpful, I'd be happy if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MetroManhattan. Until the next time,